Good evening, everybody. My name is Ed Fchak, WX2R. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Fairlawn Amateur Radio Club, and I want to welcome you to this, our first Coffee Talk of 2023, which starts our 8th year of continuously doing programming for the club about the best speakers. Okay, the Speakers Bureau for the Hudson Division. How's that? Okay, in terms of what's going on. Okay, in terms of amateur radio. And tonight I think we're in for a real treat. Our speaker tonight, James Gallo, KB2FMH, who's going to be talking to us about DX-pedition. So without further ado, let me turn the program over to our club president, Dave Corsello, KD2JIP. Dave, over to you.
Thanks, Ed. James, we look forward to everything you have to say tonight. Back to you, Ed.
Okay, so thanks, Dave. Okay, just a little bit of background. Obviously, if you've been with us here, James is probably the all-purpose, all-rounder DXer and ham radio operator. He's first licensed in 1985 as a novice. He's an avid DX chaser before there was any global spotting, which the world has changed a lot, okay? But DXing has definitely taken on a life of its own. And James is a person that we're really enamored with and envious of because of his background. He returned to amateur radio after a long hiatus. He's an extra class operator who continues to hunt for DX. He's got 283 DXCC and 284. So that
I got a new one for Naba Island.
There you go. He's an avid DXer, and obviously, let me just turn the program over without further ado. James Gallo, KB2FMH. James,
folks, hello here. This is me. Everything Ed said might be true. It might not. I'm not as wonderful as he makes me out to be. Just an old Brooklyn kid who got into radio by virtue of learning signaling, Morse code, semaphore, and what's called wigwag, which is Morse code with a flag, for my Boy Scout signaling merit badge in the 70s. And then naturally I transitioned to walkie-talkies and then Archer kits and then CB, which led me into amateur radio because the FCC wanted to confiscate my high-powered equipment on 11 meters. So I got licensed and went legit, which led me to where I am now, having a great time. And I do like the fact that amateur radio has opened up to so many, but I'm still an old phone guy, SSB and AM. I gave up the key as soon as I got a general back, I think in 86, late 86, because I like to talk, which you'll learn soon enough. Or those who have met me already understand that. And I prefer only to speak. I can't find myself the joy in my computer doing the work for me, but I understand it's becoming a very big thing. And it's nice to keep growing, but I perpetuate the voice mode or the human mode, as I like to call it. So you'll learn about that later on. So let's start off with this. You'll see on your screen or my share what DXpeditions, what are they really? So DX is anywhere else but the country where you live. Could even be on the same continent. Although an expedition is a trip to a place, it is usually not like a common visit to a comfortable place. Not always. Some of them are, but not all of them are. The most desirable expeditions hams want to get are the places on Earth that are not very human-friendly. Some of them are even dangerous. I'm going to try to buzz through the slides. You can read all that. Here's the lovely card I designed for the expedition. You'll see that little cat on the left-hand side. That's indicative of what the word Kiska means. It's Russian for cat. And at one point, when Russia owned Alaska, they named everything. So to keep the faith, and being that I was there with, as you'll see the logo, the Russian Robinson Club, which exclusively activate islands, because they're a big IOTA group. They care more about islands than DXCC. So we bicker about where we're going next. But that little cat I threw in there as homage to Kiska. And we also had it put into POTA for those folks. And it's always been an island on the air. Had we gotten up higher, we probably could have got a summit on the air. But, we can't please everyone, right? So the recent activation was at one such place where it's a little bit dangerous. It's an island formed by a volcano in the middle of the Bering Sea, which I believe is one of the most formidable bodies of water on Earth. It's the second to last island in the Aleutian chain off the west coast of Alaska. We were closer to Russia and Japan than to the U.S. mainland. Severe storms come to you without warning and can wreak havoc on anyone there, but more on that later. Here's the process, and it might not be in the exact order, but I tried to get it in the best order. People don't realize what it takes to organize a DX-pedition, and that propagation, local conditions, weather, equipment failure, etc., all play a role in the way chasers see the operation. First is, where do you want to go? Continental or island? You want to do cold? You want to do warm? You want comfortable? Or do you want rugged? Well, we chose cold and rugged island. Can it be done? That's a big question. Has anyone been there before? What was their experience? Any hardships or injuries? That has to be considered. How do you get there? By plane? By boat? Sometimes by helicopter? How safe will the landing be? And what potential is there for injury during the stay? It's another thing to consider. Will the governing body allow access? Is a special permit required? Any fees, any rules, any environmental impact that you'll imposing on the location? How long do you want to stay? You don't want to spend a lot of time and money traveling to stay just for a few days. The 3YOJ team will be staying on Bouvet for 3 full weeks. They've contracted with the boat 22 days on the island for the boat to make it worth staying there. So 3 full weeks after meeting in London and then flying to the Falklands to load the ship, which is a sailboat, for the 10 to 15 day sail, depending on the weather. Next to consider is, where will you make the camp and set up your stations? What's needed for that? We needed tents, power, fresh water, and sanitary facilities. Well, our sanitary facility was a bucket with a custom fit toilet seat that's made to go on a 5-gallon bucket with, I guess, sanitary bags that you dispose of. We brought with us 60 gallons of fresh water, and as I said, our toilet was a bucket behind a dune. We had a shovel there in case we had, it filled up. We'd bury that bag and put a new one in. We brought food that was easily prepared, which are called MREs, military stuff, meals ready to eat for those unfamiliar. And they would not cause many trips to the latrine. You don't want to bring a lot of stuff that's going to flush you. You want some solids. Best bet would have been to eat peanut butter all week, because that really bonds you up. We bathed with disinfecting baby wipes. I brought 6 big packs of them myself, because there's nowhere to put any kind of shower or wash unless you wanted to get down into your skivvies and end up in the bay itself. Dishes and utensils were cleaned with sand and rinsed in the ocean at low tide with our knee-high boots. Equipment, though, is a major factor when traveling to these remote areas. How many radios, antennas, amplifiers, if any? We brought a half a dozen amps because we wanted to make sure we were heard. And it wasn't that far of a hike from where the boat sat, 300 yards from shore. And we made about 30 trips with our little dinghy. What do we bring for a backup? How much coax do you need? Do we need tools? Sure, we had to have some tools, be ready to change connectors. We had a soldering station. We brought what we would need in the shack, basically. You can't depend on batteries and sunlight, so we brought a big 8-kilowatt generator. We did get sun for about a total of 1 day out of the dozen days we spent in that area. We also had to bring 150 gallons of gasoline to ensure nonstop operation. We did make a couple of quick trips back to the boat with the little dinghy to refill our gas cans. The water pretty much lasted. We weren't using that much water. As I said, we washed with ocean water and just sand to clean our 1 plastic dish, and you wipe off your fork and spoon that you carry around in your pocket. What are your goals there? How many contacts do you want to make? What bands will you operate? What modes? All these things have to be considered. When do you want to operate? Is everybody going to operate on all bands, on all modes, or are people designated? Can it be done in this way? As a matter of fact, I was the sole SSB operator, so I only stopped to sleep, eat, and visit the bucket, as we aptly named it. So then choosing the team is another critical aspect. Once somebody decides where to go, usually a couple of people are making these choices. Then you pick a team. You don't want to get a rookie or a stranger because you never know what can happen in a remote area. You also don't want people with any kind of an oddball history. Personally, I was called at the last minute to fill in, but I was referred by a longtime expeditioner who you guys all know, our friend Adrian, K08 Sugar Charlie Alpha, who at the time had been on, let's say, two and a half dozen, almost 2.5 dozen expeditions. So him referring me to the leader of the Russian Robinson Club was his word was good. He knows me. We've worked together. He trusted me. So that made it easier for me to get on board. And I was a fill-in for a Canadian who was slated to go, but unfortunately, he had some health issues with that COVID business. Then again, you want to be wary of how many people you take on, because you got to develop a budget. The more rugged the expedition is going to be, of course, the greater the costs. The more people, the less cost per person. Less people, the participants, the operators have to shell out more. The total cost for Kiska ran just short of $100,000 there and back, between the boat and the fuel being the biggest nut at more than half. Then the rest of it was personal travel, equipment buys, and a lot of donations. I mean, we count the donations. We've got a lot of stuff from major vendors, DX Engineering being our biggest, who gave us, I would say, close to $10K in equipment for this, thanks to our friendship with Tim Duffy, who I'm sure you guys know well. We all seek support from the ham community, so we got a lot of donations. Once I advertised it as a POTA entity, let me tell you that when we offered the special card for the $100 or more, we started to get a lot of $100 donations. Some folks even sent $200 and $300. A couple of them are watching this video right now, FLARC members. But the bulk of the $100 donations was POTA members, 49.4%. It may not be the bulk, but I would say that was a good chunk. The next group, less than 100, more than 5, less than 100, POTA people were at 78.4 or 5%, which is tremendous. Right now, we've got about 20% of donors for 3Y, and that hit in the last couple of weeks. If you guys follow that, whoever does, when they announced they reached their budget, they actually went over. They were down about 11,000, and I made a quick blast on the Parks on the Air Facebook page, and then within a week, a swarm of donations. They're over budget by $6,000. So they've got that much more to give back to the operators, or, reimburse whoever bought anything, or just, maybe have a good, comfortable dinner before they get on the boat. So I don't want to get too much into it, but you get the gist of how it takes a little bit of planning to do. Let's go to the next slide. The total mileage for ourselves, just so you know what the travel is, for myself and Adrian, who we met at Newark and flew out of Newark, was almost 5,000 miles, 4,843 miles, or very close to 8,000 kilometers. That was 2 planes, New York to Anchorage, Anchorage to Adak, and then a 40-hour boat ride west in the Bering Sea. On the way out, we hit swells that were 10 to 15 feet, and we were getting thrown around in our bunks. But fortunately, Adrian gave me a little thing to put behind my ear called a scopolamine patch. So this shows kind of the distance. It was on the QRZ page. The total distance we traveled was substantial from New York, and that's the boat we went on. That fella Rick, the captain, he looks very gruff. You saw him in a bar, you might say, oh, he looks like some kind of a hobo. But let me tell you, the guy's brilliant. I spent most of my time on the boat, either up in the wheelhouse talking to him or down on the deck talking to him. Very intelligent man, very knowledgeable. He was also on the Deadliest Catch series a couple of seasons back. I forget the name of the boat he captained then, but he was part of that show and is a witness to a deadly accident. And I think that's what made him leave the show. Didn't want to see that anymore because someone, he saw one of his friends' boats disappear into the Bering, because you could get a rogue wave that comes in at 70 or 100 feet and you don't see it until it knocks your boat over, especially at night. All your lights are focused on your fishing area. They do a lot of crabbing there, so they have those big cages they pull up, and the lights are focused there. And when it's dark, although you only get about 2.5 to 3 hours of darkness. I want to say latitude. We didn't know what day it was. By the second day we were there, I had no idea what time it was or what day it was, because you got 21.5 hours of daylight. So it's hard. You go to sleep, it's daylight. You wake up, it's daylight. If you happen to wake up and it's dark, within an hour, it's daylight again. So kind of rough getting acclimated. But I didn't care what time it was. As I said, I woke up, I ate, I operated as propagation allowed. I slept when I was tired. I operated when I was awake. I did about 10,500 Qs total in the time I was there. I would have liked more. I'm a little jealous when I see that the people in the Congo are at 90,000 already, but they're in a better place and they've got more operators going more full time and they're more comfortable. So what are you going to do? Anyway, there's the boat from the loading dock in ADAC. We're putting stuff on. We met the boat about 2 a.m. local on ADAC and loaded our gear for that last part. Again, it's only dark for about 3 hours due to the latitude and the season. Here's some of the gear being loaded on the boat. The storage, one of our operators, Tim, the oldest guy there, was in his mid-70s, NL8F. He runs a machinist's operation that caters to boat repair in Dutch Harbor. So they shipped a lot of stuff from Washington to Dutch Harbor. He stored it, and that's the little boat that we traveled on, that one you see in the foreground there. I call it a bathtub with a motor. We had a 5-horsepower motor, which we probably could have used a 20. It would have been a lot better. There is a lot of stuff to go. All the stuff that's wrapped and covered is for us to go. Those blue tarps are covering the bins that held all the equipment. All our personal gear was somewhere else. In the picture on the left, you see Alex. He was a first-time operator, recently licensed, just got his general, but he's a friend of Yuri, the team leader in Washington, and he's got some family in Alaska, so he was brought in on it too. He happens to be a professional commercial pilot who flies globally for Delta Airlines, which meant we designated him as the pilot for the boat, making all the trips. He's also the guy you'd put on the horse in the race because he's small, he's lightweight, and doesn't take up a lot of space. In the other picture, we're getting ready to move some stuff around. That's Adrian on the right with the red jacket. Yuri's got the hat and the gray jacket, and Tim, you could see his beard from the back. That's how big it is. He's down there also. So we had 8 of those big fish pots filled with gear, numbered and sorted with an inventory list for speedy setup. So we know what comes off first to get set up on the island, and then bring the rest of the supplies in. Some more. This picture speaks for itself. That they were designated the first to go on shore, Yuri and Adrian, to get to get the stuff off the dinghy and start setting up as fast as they could. Right, and here they're getting their chest waders on because there's 3-foot waves hitting the beach, and that's as low as it's going to go. So they had to jump out and be in sometimes hip deep water. So they had to get their waders on for that. Again, the little dinghy, how we got to the island. They're getting ready to go. You can see the smile on Adrian's face. He loves this. I think Bouvet is his 30th or 31st expedition. Now that guy needs to go in the history books for this. I don't know anyone else in this world who's been on that many, and he's traveled the world for this. So that little mini Zodiac, the bathtub with a motor, is what made it there. Here's some images of them going to unload. You see the distance where it is, and that little clear area is kind of where we camped out. Here they are setting up in that clear spot. That's we're now all on the island. The fella in the red is Hal Turley. I think he's W8HC or WH8C. I forget his call. Nice fella. He's the treasurer of INDEXA, for anybody who knows what INDEXA is, the International DX Association. And he was on the last failed attempt to Bouvet back in 2018, where he lost a fortune, about 80 grand of his own money. But he's still in good cheer and had a great time here. He was recently on the Svalbard expedition, for those who chase the Juliet Whiskey Zero Alpha. He was there. Unfortunately, he developed an illness there and came back here and had some heart issues, which not too good. He's not much older than me, mid-60s. Nonetheless, we had a lot of stuff that we have to unpack and sort. And thankfully, it's all labeled. And the fella in the blue hat, Yuri, he put it all together. I really thank him for being so efficient. That was the tent that was operating 2 FT8 stations on 30 and the 17 meter station through that antenna you see in the top left, which was the VDA, vertical dipole array. And we've got some other parts laying there ready to set up. And that's a pretty cool little tent. It withheld the storm. My tent, unfortunately, did not. So we did have to leave the generators and the fuel on the beach because they're too heavy to carry up and they're noisy. There was a little bit of a berm. The generators are to the right around a curve in that little plateau. Where I'm standing taking the picture is probably about 12 feet above where the tent is. But see that sand, that volcanic sand, it's not like beach sand that you can walk on. For every step up you take, you slide back a half a step. It's like silica gel, because it's all just decayed lava that has been broken up into sand by hundreds of thousands of years of the elements. Here's our good friend, Alex, our designated driver, going back and forth. He ended up getting stuck on the unload when we had a short time limit, but I'll talk about that later. He was scared that the motor crapped out and he was halfway between with 2 people and half the equipment left on the island. Big scare. He's also the youngest guy there. Here we are having some breakfast in Anchorage before getting on the plane to go to ADAC. I took the photograph. We were met by Yuri, and it was funny. I went there in shorts, and Anchorage, Alaska, at the end of July, was warm, but I had to put on long pants once we got into ADAC. It was cold and damp, and here we are at the Anchorage airport getting ready to go. A happy trio of people. Very, very nice place. That's the stuffed moose in the background, as you might surmise. But you see, we're all excited to go. Tim and Hal. Hal, as I said, lives up in Dutch Harbor. I mean, Tim lives there. Hal went to meet him a week in advance to load the equipment onto the boat and be ready. And then it took them several days of sailing to get from Dutch Harbor to ADAC to pick us up. And they were a little delayed because of weather. But they were probably about 4 or 5 hours behind schedule. But, we got there and everything worked out. Here's where we met Alex. We're now in the ADAC airport, getting ready to go. As I said, it's a 1-story building, not 1,000 square feet of space. A little bit of a display back there behind us. I may, if anybody wants to go to the K7K QRZ page, there's a link to more photos and some videos. But don't do it now. Wait till later. One of the many sights you see is amazing. For me, as a city boy, being out there in what I'm calling almost the middle of nowhere. Maybe it's more like the edge of nowhere. But that's a volcano in the background. We passed dozens of them on our way out. The whole Aleutian chain is basically all volcanoes. That travel was certainly not boring. Anytime I was awake on the boat, I was, as I said, up in the wheelhouse, looking out the window, talking to the captain, or out on the deck, just watching and taking pictures. That tunnel carved into the cliff face was done by the Japanese to make a path to go up to the top of the island during the World War II. During high tide, you can't see that. You could see the tide line on the rock if you look close enough. You could see how high the water does get in that area. But that tunnel led up probably about 60 or 70 feet to get up onto the surface. There's a joke about the difference between the Americans who were on Kiska and the Japanese when they took it for a while. The Japanese built tunnels which hid them from view. The Americans, who built everything on land, built targets. It doesn't sound so nice, but it's the truth. Just another view. You see that on the left-hand side? That's a waterfall that's perpetual from the snow melt on the mountains, the little glaciers up there, and that volcano on the right that's obscured by little clouds. It's constantly steaming, which then condenses and falls back as rain perpetually, causing that waterfall to be nonstop. At least that's what our captain told us, because he passes it all the time doing his fishing out there. He said that waterfall, and it's about 60 feet, never ends. Pretty cool to view these things. Another nice shot, a break in the clouds for a moment. From what I understood, that area gets about 10 days of sunlight annually at best. We were lucky, and we caught a little sunlight when we approached for our landing. We got a few hours more on the third or fourth day after a storm wiped out the tent Adrian and I were sleeping in. We got a little bit of sunlight, which warmed us up and enabled us to build our backup tent so we were sleeping somewhere. And then the day we left, we got some sun. It was ahead of schedule. We were all sitting in that tent on the beach. And then as soon as we saw the sun, we said, let's make the move now. Called the captain on walkie-talkie we had given him and said, we're coming, get ready. It was our kitchen station. That's Hal cutting up some packaged meat that I brought all the way from Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. That's some kind of Russian sausage that I brought. And Hal was our cook. We've got a little coffee thing going there. It's actually hot water. Whatever you wanted to make, you put in. I had brought some nice cappuccino packets from New York, but they had the instant coffee and the powdered creamer, which it isn't all that bad when it's all you got. That tent in the rear was the 20 and 15 meter tent, and also CW and one station doing FT8 nonstop. Tim, the older fella, manned the FT8 station continuously. I don't think he got out of his chair from when he sat in it to operate to when we left. He got out of the chair, maybe once or twice to use the restroom / bucket. But we had about an hour to eat before the rain would come back. So we did our best, and then that top would cover everything. Here they are in that rear tent, Tim with the FT, and Alex just sitting there watching another FT station through the Elecraft K3 and the KPA 500 amplifier. Tim had, I forget what amplifier he had there, a Mercury or something. That ended up going bad on us, and we swapped it out for a smaller ALS 600 that he had as a backup. The Ameritron, which I think somebody said they found one for the club use, and that's a good thing to have. Nice amp. So, Alex operated a few calls on sideband, but he was a little mic shy, but he took to it well after a while. But he's still a little bit shy, and he's getting there. He does a lot of digital. He's learning CW, but he had a great time being there, and he was really a boon to us. He did all the running around. He explored the island as a hiker, taking a lot of photographs, brought back some relics for us to look at. So he did really well. Nice guy. Is Yuri doing a little 17 meter? He likes the hand mic. I prefer the headset. That's the tent on the beach. There I am, your ever happy host here, having a great time. And you know what struck them as funny? I was able to do it not split. And I was asked by Yuri, a very avid islands on the air expedition. He's maybe done a dozen and a half island expeditions. He said, James, we always do split. Why aren't you running split operation? And I said simply, Yuri, you guys do an expedition once, twice, maybe 3 times a year for a day or so. And based on propagation, you make some calls. To me, I get pileups 2, 3, 4 times a week doing POTA, and they can get as heavy as anything here. When you got 1,000 voices in this mic, in the speaker or the headphone, and you got to pick one out. You develop an ear for it. So I didn't run split once on the operation, and the pileups got pretty heavy. I did get some problems from some of the Europeans, the Italians, and the Spanish. Don't let up when they're calling. If you don't answer them, they just don't shut up no matter who's talking. Whereas the JAs, if you say to, give them a partial and say, please stand by, they are the most courteous. They will wait until you call them again. And if you take somebody else in front of them, they don't interfere with you. They still will wait. But I had a little scratch pad. I was making notes, taking, as many as partials as I could get and trying to acknowledge them all. And I hope I made a lot of people happy. A lot of our FLARC people called in. I was so happy to hear you guys. And a lot of our POTA friends called in, and they were happy to hear me. So at that station there again, the KPA 500 with the K3 radio, really great radio. And there's my lovely brand spanking new, first time used was there. Pro 7 headset, courtesy of DX Engineering. I really appreciated what Tim did for us. And down on the floor is my little coffee thermos because you couldn't go without it. Is our buddy Adrian doing CW in the other tent, that beach tent. He listens by ear, but he types back because he says it's easier for him to type than to use the key, but he can hear up to 40 words a minute while he's talking to me. Amazing CW operator. He's going to be banging out the CW on Bouvet, but he did promise me he's going to operate some phone. He's hoping that he gets to work me somehow, some way. But he's as far as CW goes, he's an expert. He loves it. There I am, just hanging out. I'm getting ready to go on. Yuri's setting something up for me, getting the ALC adjusted because he was on a different band and using a different mode. So we're switching me back to 17-meter phone for that. Good old Hal working some CW, also very good at it. He's fast and he does it with the paddles. And there's our man Tim enjoying the running 2 FT8 operations at once. And there you see is the Ameritron amp after losing the other one, the Mercury. And he's got one of those Sun SDRs by SPE that I guess that interfaces. I know nothing about FT8, so I can't speak to any of it. He manned that digital station for the entire time. Got to give that guy credit. He didn't get seat fatigue at all, but he's still happy as can be. It just goes to show you, look at the conditions we're living in, but we're still having a good time doing it because it's fun. Here we are on the boat on the way, myself, Adrian, discussing, how we're going to set up and what to start with. Yuri's just sitting there listening to us bicker about, what to do first, what to get set up first. Here's good old Alex. His 20 or 30 contacts on voice made him real excited. So hopefully he'll be on another one with us. But he's got 2 little kids. Doing these things is not so easy for him. Here they are. They're out on a little exploratory hike, these 2. Hal had a GoPro. He also had a beautiful drone that he used to make some videos of us. It inspired me to get a drone. I haven't used it yet, but I got one. And I was practicing flying it in my living room. And one of the blades of one of the 4 propellers hit me in the eye. So I smacked it down to the floor, and it's sitting in the box waiting for me to get outdoors. I mentioned a little bit of a storm. I think it was the 3rd night we were there. We had 70 to 80 mile winds come in from our viewpoint towards the bay, coming from the west blowing east. And that tent was completely collapsed. I only propped the front up to get in and trying to fix it, reset some of the guys. But Adrian and myself were sleeping in that tent in the dark during the 2.5 hours of darkness. when the rain just started to beat the crap out of it, and then the winds were blowing it all over the place to where it collapsed, snapped some poles. We were holding it up by hand as we were trying to continue to sleep. We waited a few hours until it subsided, and then by 4 a.m., the sun was up. It was daylight again, and we went out and started to clean up. You could see some other things are blown over on the left. And in the next slide, you'll see me sitting there, happy to be trying to pull on something, but happy to be not dead or blown. If it wasn't for the fact that we had so much other equipment in that tent between us, it's a big tent. It's a 10 or 12-man tent, and it's just us two in there. It would have got blown into that harbor, you see. That's Kiska Harbor. And the void just to the right of that little bit of a sloping cliff, that's open out to the Bering Sea. So we could have ended up in there and gotten blown out to sea, never to be seen again. Here I am getting ready to do some fishing, and I'm wearing my 10-mile River Scout fleece jacket, which kept me warm. And that thing around my neck is a beautiful waterproof cell phone container that we had to keep it in because it's constantly moist there. The humidity was never less than 50%, and more often than not, it was about 60%, but cold enough that you're not sweating. And as you can tell, I didn't shave too much there. But I bought that little collapsible, portable fishing setup just for this event. I didn't catch anything, but it was still fun. Again, here's the view that you see behind my head in the beginning before I shared. That's us approaching in the harbor, and I thought I'd get a nice shot as the sun broke up some of the clouds. That volcano is not dead, but it's not active. It's not dead. It could go at any minute. Every once in a while, I hear that it steams, but that's what helped form that island, as you see it, is a different shot of it coming in from the top because we had to take a convoluted route based on the currents and the swells blowing at us. We had to go around the north and then come in and go around to the left and swoop into the harbor. Now, the next shot you're going to love. Where else are you going to get a view like this? That's a lovely seagull. They were following the boat because it still had remnants of fish. Birds were never ending out there. I don't know how they survived that far out. There it is. And it's just perfect timing for the photograph. Now, I mentioned dangerous. We were told by Fish and Wildlife Service to stay away from certain areas and do not touch anything that's on the ground. And if you could read this, if you can't, it says former military battle area. There are unexploded bombs, shells, and grenades, mortars, and similar items, and they're hazardous and may explode if moved or handled. Something I couldn't read the rest is prohibited. Now, what else did we see there? Well, here you go. This was left there, and this is remnants from the Battle of the Aleutians, World War II, a forgotten battle where a lot of people died. It was just abandoned. That's a U.S. anti-aircraft cannon. This is a Japanese two-man submarine, of which there were several strewn about the island. So some of the hardships are where to go, how you live in these remote areas, but some of the benefits of these expeditions are what you get to see. Besides being a wildlife reserve, it's also a national historic monument because of the battle that was fought there. There's body parts. We didn't find any. I mean, I half expected to find a shoe with some foot bones in it or dog tags around a spine, but maybe I'm a little morbid. We didn't find any of that. They probably cleaned that up because somebody was there in the 70s or 80s and they erected some kind of plaque. But otherwise, no, people don't go there. It's totally devoid of people. Another nice view of the boat trip with some birds. I think that may have been as we were getting closer to Kiska. I'm not sure. Here we are again. Some seagulls hang out with us. That's the view. Nothing for miles, hundreds of miles of absolute nothing. But again, on the island, there was this. This is popular in some of the pictures if you would Google search. That's a Japanese battleship that was sunk back in the 42 or 43. And it's over time been pushed more inland, and it's getting absorbed by the sand. I guess the better half of it is buried in the sand, but Japanese ship left there. Here's another cannon. I think it's a 4 or 5 inch. I don't know if they were using millimeters back then, but I think it's a 5-inch gun because we found some 5-inch shells. A couple of more parts of submarines used by the Japanese. Now, the people who are going to Bouvet are not going to see any of this. What they're going to see is penguins and seals who are going to be annoying the crap out of them, but they can't do anything about it. Here's a nice view. Alex took some photos from the top of the hill. That's the entry point into Kiska Harbor. That view is east-southeast. I would say it's probably about 100 degrees on a compass. Good old Captain Rick at the helm. And he was kind enough, after some of our conversation, to put me at the wheel and let me drive the boat on the way home. Not on the way there. He, took him time to get to know me. But in the 70s and 80s, I was an active fisherman locally in Brooklyn, and I had a friend who had an 80-foot fishing boat, and he taught me how to captain. I never got the captain's license, but I learned how to read charts, read the markers, and operate the ship. So I had a good time doing that. A lot of high-tech equipment now. Here we are taking a little break in one of the few moments of no rain or mist. You see that white cable? That's our CAT cable connecting all the computers for logging to avoid dupes. Here we are trying to fix it. I mentioned the motor went bad. Apparently, there's something down at the bottom that sucks water in to cool that motor. It's a water cooled. And we're hitting the beach and on all those trips. This happened when we were leaving. The motor picked up some of that volcanic sand and it clogged the coolant system, and the motor was stalling. So fortunately, oars are fixed to that little bathtub. So Alex, our pilot, had to row back to the boat to take it apart to get it up on here, where Tim, the mechanic, figured out, and he blew it out with compressed air. That's an air hose in his hand from the compressor on the boat that he blew it out to get all the sand out. And then we put it in a bucket of water and ran it, and it was cooling properly and it ran smooth. The motor was brand new. We couldn't understand what was wrong with it. Here we are at the end. One of the photos as we're ready to leave. We tribute the 80th anniversary, which was also part of our special event. So not only was it an island on the air, a parks on the air, a DX-pedition for Alaska. I mean, most people have Alaska who are DX chasers, but a lot don't, especially you POTA folks. You know how tough it is to get Alaska and Hawaii. Well, but let me tell you, we got a lot of Hawaiian stations because it's practically was our downstairs neighbor there in the South Pacific. But we commemorated the 80th anniversary of the fight between the Japanese and U.S. And we then all signed that Japanese flag and mailed it to a relative of the admiral who led that battle up there. And they then were going to present it to the school that the admiral went to as a kid. I can't remember the fella's name, but he eventually got it and thanked us. So that has a little bit of significance. You'll notice Yuri wearing pajamas. He was very, very comfortable. And Adrian is wearing that heavy stuff because he brought it to test. What better place to test it for Bouvet, which is also going to be hell on earth and cold. So he brought all his outdoor gear, sleeping and clothing, sleeping bag and other such things, and some Swedish MREs for us to try to that expedition. Here we are again with all the flags except for the Japanese flag. That's the Alaskan flag, IOTA. We had to give them a little bit because a couple of the guys are friends with Cesar, who's one of the big wigs for Islands on the Air, who's also going to Bouvet with them. He's on the trip now. And of course, as the patriotic Boy Scout, I said I'll hold the American flag. Here we are, packed and ready to leave. That piece of wood is ours. We brought that with us. I think it goes in the bottom of the boat, that sheet of plywood. But they dropped that tent last. I think they're on one of the several trips going back. And here we are at that pizza store that opens up after the airport closes, where we stopped for a quick bite to eat and get our last photograph taken. One more after this. There is that volcano again. As we leave, it looks like the same shot, but it's not. We just took the same path. And let me tell you, when I say that view alone was worth the trip, it was. If anybody wants to see all the pictures that I've got, we didn't publicly put all of them, but if anybody wants to see, I could, just send me an email through my QRZ email, and I'll send you a link to all the pictures and videos. I have them somewhere on a Google Images thing. And here's the last one. It tells you all that. And with that, I'm going to stop the share.
Thanks so much. This was outstanding. So let's really turn it over for questions, because I know I've got a couple. So let's open it up for everybody else. Please, who has a question?